The CB had been quiet for an hour, just the low hiss of static and the constant, droning hum of 18 wheels eating up asphalt. I was deep in the belly of Arkansas, the kind of stretch where the pine trees crowd in so thick they feel like a wall, and the night is so black it seems to swallow your headlights whole. My destination was a warehouse in Little Rock, a simple drop-hand hook, but I'd gotten a late start out of Memphis. The dashboard glowed with a soft, greenish light, the only real company I had. The coffee in my thermos had long since gone cold and bitter, but I sipped it anyway, a force of habit. Outside, a light drizzle started to mist the windshield, the wipers keeping a slow, metronome beat. This was my life, my rhythm. The solitude never bothered me. In fact, I craved it. I'd passed a sign for some town with a name I could never pronounce right, a blur of letters in the rearview. The map on my phone was just a line of a road cutting through a vast expanse of green, no towns, no services for another 50 miles. Just me, my rig, and the whispering tires. It was peaceful, in its own way. The kind of peace that makes your eyelids heavy. I shifted in my seat, trying to work a kink out of my shoulder. The road was a straight shot, a -67, a ribbon of gray under the pale moonlight that occasionally broke through the cloud cover. I cracked the window a hair, the scent of wet asphalt and damp earth flooding the cab, a welcome change from the smell of stale coffee and old leather. I thought about the last stop, a truck stop diner with greasy eggs and a waitress who called me sugar. It felt like a lifetime ago, a memory from another world. Out here, the past and future didn't matter. All that existed was the present, the next mile marker, the next curve in the road. It was a kind of meditation, a trance state induced by endless motion. My mind began to wander, thinking about the cargo I was hauling. Just a load of generic paper products, toilet paper and napkins. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous. The most mundane freight for the most mundane of late-night drives, I chuckled to myself. If only the people using this stuff knew the journey it took to get to them. I was jolted from my thoughts by a sound. It was faint at first, almost lost under the rumble of the engine and the whine of the tires. A quick, skittering noise, like a pebble bouncing around in a fender well. I shrugged it off. Trucks are noisy beasts. They're always talking to you, groaning and rattling. You learn to ignore most of it. But this was different. It wasn't a random rattle. It was rhythmic. A quick scratch, 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 then a pause. Then again, scratch, scratch, scratch. It was coming from the front of the truck, from somewhere under the massive hood. I sat up a little straighter, my grip tightening on the wheel. I turned down the CB, straining to listen. There it was again, not a pebble. It was too deliberate, too organic. It sounded like claws. Like something small and determined was trying to dig its way through my engine block. A cold knot began to tighten in my stomach. This wasn't part of the truck's normal song. This was something new, and in the deep, dark heart of Arkansas, new is rarely a good thing. My first thought, the logical one, was that a branch had snapped off one of the overhang pines and gotten lodged in the grill. It happens. The wind whips through these back roads, and the trees shed their limbs like a dog sheds fur. I muttered a curse under my breath. The last thing I needed was a punctured radiator or a torn hose. I scanned the road ahead for a wide shoulder or, better yet, a pull-off. The drizzle was turning into a steady rain now, the wipers swishing back and forth at a medium pace. The scratching continued, a persistent, nagging sound that was starting to get under my skin. It was the rhythm of it that was so unnerving. It felt intentional. Finally, I saw a break in the trees, a gravel lot that probably served as a school bus stop during the day. It was empty and dark now. I signaled, though there was no one to see it for miles, and guided the big rig onto the gravel, the crunching sound a stark contrast to the smooth hum of the pavement. The truck came to a stop with the hiss of the air brakes. The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. The engine ticked as it cooled. The rain pattered softly on the roof. I sat there for a full minute, listening. Nothing. No scratching. No skittering. Just the normal sounds of a truck settling down for a brief rest. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. See, I told myself, just a branch. You spooked yourself like a rookie. I pulled on my heavy waterproof jacket and grabbed the big steel flashlight from the passenger side door. The cab door opened with a loud, metallic creak, and I stepped down into the gravel. The cold, damp air hit my face, a shock to the system. The world outside was immense and dark, the kind of quiet that feels like a physical presence. I trudged through the mud and gravel to the front of the truck, the beam of my flashlight cutting a wobbly path through the gloom. The chrome grille and headlights were splattered with mud and dead bugs. I played the light over the grille, looking for the offending branch. There was nothing. No twigs, no leaves, nothing tangled in the bumper. Frowning, I walked to the side, unhooked the latches, and heaved the massive hood open. It groaned on its hinges, a sound of heavy metal and oil. The engine sat there, a complex, greasy sculpture of black hoses, aluminum, and wires. It was still hot, and rain sizzled where it landed on the exhaust manifold. The smell of diesel and hot metal filled the air. I shone the flashlight into every crevice, into the dark spaces around the block, behind the alternator, deep into the radiator fan. I saw oil stains and road grime. I saw a few cobwebs. But there was no animal, no branch, no logical explanation for the sound I had heard. It was just a truck engine, sitting silently in the rain. The knot in my stomach returned, tighter than before. I slammed the hood shut, the loud clang echoing in the silent woods. I stood there for a moment, rain dripping from the brim of my cap, listening. Nothing but the patter of rain and the distant croak of a frog. Maybe it had been my imagination. Fatigue can do funny things to your mind, make you hear things that aren't there. I'd been on the road for 10 hours straight. It was a plausible explanation, and I clung to it. Back in the cab, the warmth was a welcome relief. I shook the rain off my jacket and placed the flashlight back in its holder. I took a long swig of water, the cold liquid doing little to wash away the unease. Starting the engine felt like a monumental task. The big diesel rumbled to life, a familiar, comforting sound. For a moment, everything felt normal. I pulled back onto the highway, the tires slushing through the wet road. For the first 5 minutes, there was nothing, just the engine, the road, the rain. I started to relax, my shoulders dropping from my ears. I even managed a small, self-deprecating smile. A veteran driver like me, spooked by a noise. I'd have a hell of a story for the guys at the next stop. And then it started again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was fainter this time, but unmistakable. It wasn't coming from the grill area anymore. It sounded like it was deeper inside, from underneath the intake manifold, a part of the engine you'd need tools and an hour to get to. The rhythm was the same, quick, insistent, a frantic scrabbling. My blood ran cold. This wasn't fatigue. This wasn't a branch. Something was in there. Something alive. A mouse, a rat. Could a rat survive in a moving engine compartment? Maybe it had crawled in when I was stopped. But the sound had started while I was moving at 60 miles an hour. Nothing should be able to hold on in that environment. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles were white. The sound would stop for 30 seconds, a minute, and I dared to hope it was gone. Then it would start up again, a little tapping at my sanity. It was playing a game with me, or it was busy. The thought of what it might be busy doing was even worse. I tried to drown it out. I turned the CB back up, fiddled with the radio, finding a static-laced country station from some distant town. But I could still hear it, a sinister little rhythm section underneath the twang of a steel guitar. It was there, it was real, and it was riding with me, a stowaway in the very heart of my truck. The next 100 miles were a special kind of torture. The scratching became the soundtrack to my drive, a constant reminder that I was not alone. My eyes kept flicking to the temperature gauge. It held steady, a needle in the green. Whatever it was, it hadn't bitten through a coolant hose. Yet, every bump in the road, every change in the engine's pitch, made me flinch. I was hyper-aware of the machine around me, listening for any sign of trouble. The comfortable, familiar cab now felt like a cage. I was trapped in here with the sound, and the thing making it was trapped out there, just a few feet away, separated only by a thin sheet of metal. I started talking to it. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Just hang on till morning, you little bastard. Then you can get the hell off my truck." The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on me. I was negotiating with a noise. The rain began to ease, and a sliver of moon broke through the clouds, casting long, distorted shadows from the pine trees that looked like grasping fingers. The world felt ancient and watchful. I remembered old stories I'd heard in diners, tales from other drivers about strange things seen on lonely roads. I'd always dismissed them as tall tales, the product of loneliness and too much caffeine. Now, I wasn't so sure. I saw the glow of lights up ahead, a 24-hour gas station and a small cluster of buildings. Hope, frail and desperate, bloomed in my chest. Civilization. Maybe I could pull and pop the hood and see if I could spot it with the engine running. Or maybe I could find a mechanic, even at this ungodly hour. I pulled off the highway and into the bright, fluorescent glow of the station. It was a lonely oasis of light, the pumps standing like silent sentinels. An old man in coveralls was mopping the floor inside the convenience store. I parked the rig at the far end of the lot, away from the lights, wanting privacy for whatever I was about to find. I didn't turn the engine off. I sat there, listening. The scratching had stopped the moment I slowed down. It was quiet. It knew we were stopped. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This thing, whatever it was aware. It was reacting to its environment. This was no simple animal. I sat there for 10 minutes, the engine idling smoothly. Not a sound. It was hiding, waiting for me to go away. Waiting for the journey to resume. I looked at the store, at the old man inside. I could go in, tell him. He'd think I was crazy. He might even call the cops on a drugged-up trucker. I had no proof, just a story about a sound. With a sinking feeling, I knew I had no choice. I had a schedule to keep. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the dark highway. Within 2 minutes, the scratching started again. It was louder now, more confident, as if it knew I was powerless to stop it. I had made a deal, and my passenger was back to work. The night stretched on, an endless, dark corridor. The scratching became a part of me, a pulse beating in time with my own frantic heart. I was no longer just driving. I was participating in a bizarre, terrifying ritual. I was the charioteer, and this thing was the malevolent spirit powering my ride. My eyes were glued to the dashboard, specifically the temperature gauge. It was my canary in the coal mine. It still read normal, but every time the needle twitched, even a fraction, my breath would catch in my throat. The creature was drinking the antifreeze. The mechanic's words from a story I hadn't even heard yet were already true in my soul. It was feeding. I started to notice a pattern. The scratching would intensify on uphill grades, when the engine was working harder and was hotter. It was as if the heat agitated it, or maybe it liked it. Then, on the downslopes, it would become quieter, more of a lazy, contented tapping. I was learning its habits, and that familiarity was more horroring than the unknown. Fatigue was really setting in now, a heavy blanket weighing me down. But I was too terrified to stop. If I stopped, it might finish its work. It might crawl out. It might find its way into the cab. The thought of being stranded in this darkness with that thing loose was unthinkable. Motion was my only safety. I had to keep moving. I passed a sign. Little Rock, 75 miles. So close, yet it felt like 1,000. The sky in the east was beginning to lighten from black to a deep, bruised gray. Dawn was coming. The sight should have been a comfort, but it only heightened my anxiety. This was when things happened in horror movies, right before the sun rose. The monster's last, desperate act. And then I saw it, the temperature gauge. The needle had crept up, just a hair's breadth, but it was undeniable. It was no longer sitting perfectly in the middle of the green. It was leaning. I felt a cold sweat break out all over my body. This was it. It was happening. The engine was starting to overheat. I pressed down on the accelerator, a foolish, panicked impulse. Maybe I could outrun it. Maybe I could get close enough to a town to coast in. The engine groaned in protest, and the needle climbed another fraction. I immediately let off the gas, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was in a lose-lose situation. I couldn't stop, and I couldn't go fast. I was driving on a nice edge, the scratching from the engine a mocking applause for my predicament. The world outside was getting lighter, revealing the mist clinging to the low-lying fields. It was a beautiful, peaceful scene that stood in stark contrast to the nightmare unfolding inside the cab of my truck. I was in a race against the dawn, and I was losing. The last 20 miles were a funeral procession. The temperature needle was now steadily climbing, hovering at the edge of the red zone. A faint, sweet smell began to seep into the cab, the scent of boiling antifreeze. The check engine light flickered on, a tiny, glaring eye of condemnation. The scratching had changed. It was no longer a frantic digging. It was slower, heavier. A wet, slurping sound accompanied it now. A sound of satisfaction. It had gorged itself. It was full. My truck was dying, and the thing that was killing it was having its last meal. I was praying aloud, a stream of desperate, half-remembered words from a childhood I thought I'd left behind. Just let me make it to the yard. Just let me get off the highway. Please, just let me make it. I was talking to God, to the universe, to the thing under the hood itself. I could see the outskirts of Little Rock now, the first few scattered houses and strip malls. Civilization had never looked so good, but my truck was failing fast. White steam began to plume from the edges of the hood, a ghostly banner announcing my defeat. The engine was knocking, a deep, sickening sound that spoke of metal on metal. I took an exit ramp, the truck laboring up the incline. Every sound was a death rattle. The steering was getting heavy. I was losing power. I rolled through a green light, coasting, my only goal to get as far away from the high-speed traffic as possible. I saw the sign for my destination, the warehouse, just 2 blocks away. It was a cruel, taunting sight, so close. I turned into the industrial park, the truck shuddering violently. With a final, shuddering gasp and a huge billow of steam, the engine seized completely. The truck rolled to a silent, dead stop in the middle of the empty access road. The silence was absolute. And in that silence, I heard one last sound from under the hood. A final, soft scratch. Then a light, skittering sound, like tiny claws on hot metal, moving from the engine block, across the underside of the hood, and down, disappearing somewhere beneath the truck. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just sat there, gripping the wheel, staring at the steam pouring from my murdered truck, listening to the empty morning air. It was gone. The tow truck came an hour later. The sun was fully up, a pale, indifferent sun in a washed-out sky. I gave my statement to the warehouse foreman, a short, balding man who just seemed annoyed at the inconvenience. I told him the engine overheated, that I must have had a slow leak. I didn't mention the scratching. What would I have said? My rig was hauled to a local repair shop, a dusty lot filled with the skeletons of other trucks. I stood by as the mechanic, a grizzled old-timer with grease permanently etched into his hands, started the diagnosis. He hooked up his computer, shook his head, and then went for the physical inspection. He unlatched the hood and heaved it open. We both peered in. The engine was a mess. Coolant was everywhere, sprayed over the hot components, now a sticky, greenish residue. Hoses were chewed through, not ruptured, but chewed, with clear, sharp bite marks. The wires to the temperature sensor were gnawed to the copper. The mechanic let out a low whistle. Damn, never seen a rat do that kind of damage. They usually just nest. This one was hungry. I just nodded, my throat tight. He leaned in closer, poking at the shredded remains of a hose. Then he stopped. He reached deep into the engine bay, into a dark crevice near the firewall. He pulled his hand back out. Pinched between his thumb and forefinger was a single, long, silvery hair. It was fine, almost like a cat's, but it had an odd, metallic sheen to it, like tarnished silver. He held it up to the light, squinting. What in the ... He looked at me, then back at the hair, a strange look dawning on his face. It wasn't confusion, it was recognition. You know, he said slowly, his voice dropping, my granddaddy used to drive a rig. Ran these same roads back in the 50s. He told us kids a story. A campfire tale, really. About a thing that lives out in the deep woods, in the places no one goes. A little thing, all skin and bones and teeth. He flicked the silvery hair away, a superstitious gesture. He called it the Radiator Gremlin. Said it's attracted to the heat and the sweet smell of antifreeze. It latches on, drinks its fill while you drive, and doesn't let go till the engine boils over and dies in the most godforsaken place it can find. He looked me dead in the eye, and I saw that he believed it. He truly did. He said the only way to know for sure it was one, he continued, was to find its hair, shiny, like metal. Said it sheds when it's done feeding, when it's fat and happy and ready to find a new radiator to call home. I never finished that run. The company had to send another driver for the load. I took a bus back to my home terminal, and for a week, I didn't set foot in a truck. I still drive, it's all I know how to do. But I stick to daylight hours when I can, and I avoid Arkansas. And sometimes, on a quiet, hot night, when my engine is ticking as it cools, I think I hear it. A faint, rhythmic scratch, scratch, scratch from deep within the machinery. And I know, with a cold certainty, that my passenger isn't gone. It's just waiting for the right long, dark road to hitch another ride.